Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Council for Military Spouse Club's Uncomfortable Conversation series. This one's entitled Let's Talk Legal, where we will dive into the IRS nonprofit designations of 501c3s versus 501c7s. My name is Carolyn Chrisman, and I am the CEO, and I'm joined by Rhonda Fingal, our CFO, and Heather Alvarado, our CMO. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and a special thanks to USAA for their continued support. We will have the chat open and running, so you can all type in your questions as we move along the presentation, and one of our council board members will jump in and ask us your questions when it's appropriate. It may be beneficial for you to wait until the end of the presentation prior to asking your question in case it's answered along the way, but please feel free. If you need to jump in, just go ahead and do it. We are happy to roll with it as it comes along. During this webinar, we're going to discuss the difference between the two designations and have a few thoughts on what your organization can do legally within those designations. While we are sharing legal information, this is all available on the IRS website. So please take this as a legal discussion, but not necessarily as legal advice. If you find you need legal advice, you need to speak with a lawyer within your state. So the first question you need to answer is, what type of nonprofit organization is your club? Because that'll make a difference in which avenue you need to really pay attention to. In this presentation, we're going to discuss the different categories nonprofit spouse clubs usually fall into. They're usually either a 501c3 or a 501c7. Some places you may still find a few 501c4 spouse clubs, but most of the time, that's not a really an appropriate designation for what we define as a military spouse club. C4s are usually more like HOAs or sort of like your community soccer league. They're community organizations that aren't really out there to make money. They're just to sustain whatever organizations their mission is trying to do. So we're going to also talk a little bit about how spouses clubs can function within their designations and the organizational structures that might actually help clubs function better within those requirements. Our hope is that this information will help you to better understand what you're allowed to do within your designation. I can say that many clubs have been operating a certain way for years, but are now finding out that even though it's always been done that way, technically they're not functioning legally. And this is something we come across a lot. So you could say, well, I've been to 4 different clubs and they all do it this way. And we're not disputing that they all do it that way. We're just telling you that that's might not be exactly within the legal parameters that the IRS sets forth, depending on what your designation is. So finally, as you listen to this discussion, please keep in mind that though the IRS and the DoD cover all clubs, every service and installation has different regulations and traditional ways of doing things that might be different from what you're used to. As a council, we have to talk a little bit more strategically to help to reach all of your clubs. So you may find that you'll have more specific questions. So please, please, please feel free to contact us for help. Okay, so as a 501c3, your primary purpose is to serve the public. It's very easy distinction when you have a type of organizations that's mission is completely transparent in what we do. Think of like the Red Cross or food banks or even animal shelters. It's very obvious that they are serving the public. They may do fundraisers, they may host events, but it's all in the name of either marketing their organization or raising funds to fulfill their actual mission. With spouses clubs, it gets a little harder because there's a little bit of tradition involved in what a spouses club has always been, as well as the social aspect of bringing spouses together. However, I have to say, if your club is a C3, no matter what you do, everything you do must be to further your mission, and your mission must be clear about your intent to serve the public, and the activities you host must all work towards that specific mission. If you host a fundraiser as a C3, the donations you receive can be tax deductible for the donor. So that's all things you must keep in mind when you're talking about a C3. So as mentioned earlier, your C3 serves the public. Its mission cannot be to bring military spouses together socially. It must be something like provide assistance to the military community through grants and scholarships, or whatever your club is meant to do in their public mission. It can be something along those lines. It doesn't have to be those exact words. But think about the common activities that spouses clubs host, like maybe monthly socials, or maybe your membership drive, or whatever fundraiser you might do. Think of like a bazaar or a golf scramble or whatever else you do. Some clubs have service projects. Some clubs have what some people call sub clubs or special interest groups or mini clubs, whatever you call it. And how can you justify that these activities fall into the category of serving the public? Just because I'm a wine person, I'll use this example. A wine club having an evening at a local vineyard. Does that actually provide scholarships and grants? Not really. This is the challenge of a 501c3 for spouse clubs. I've also often heard that clubs want to be a C3 because they think they can raise more money because their deductions are their donations are then tax deductible, the people that are sending them in. But it's not all about getting a tax deductible donation. It's about what your mission is and how you are serving the public. So you have to really think about what you're trying to do, not how you want to get the money. So just remember, with a C3, it's all about the mission.
So then we kind of roll in. Again, my name's Heather Alvarado. So we roll into the key requirements of a 501c7, which is, I've seen this, it's extremely common for Spouses Club to operate as a 501c7 because the mission is really simple. You want to focus on your memberships through socials and recreational activities. Because what your overall goal is just providing a space where people can connect and unwind and enjoy themselves. Some of those common examples, and we've seen them, are just the hobby groups or mini clubs or sub clubs is what a lot of organization calls them. I've seen some questions kind of in our discussion group about creating recreational sports leagues. So spouse clubs often organize regular gatherings like the book clubs and wine clubs and things like that. So that is more than acceptable under your 501c7 designation. One of the catches, though, for your 501c7 is your fundraising limitation, because 501c7s, you can do some fundraising, but sometimes I think because they're trying to do an overall good for the community, they bring in tons of donations from the local community, whether it's money or just in-kind donations, but only 35% of your income can come from outside sources. So most of your money is going to come from membership dues, event fees, or other internal activities. And just remember that donations made to 501c7s, they're not tax deductible. So your community might be super eager to support, but those donations that they're giving to the 501c7s are not going to be tax deductible. So really your social focus and the heart of any 501c7 should be bringing people together, specifically spouses, significant others in your area. You should be focusing on fostering friendships and creating opportunities for members to bond over shared experiences. Again, that's going to be through monthly social sub-clubs, wine tastings, crafting groups, things like that. So just to summarize, really, your bottom line is the 501c7 is perfect for groups that just want to prioritize those close-knit small social communities, where everything that the 501c3 does goes back to the public. So your 501c7 focuses on the membership, 501c3s focus on the local community and giving back. And really, again, the kind of hesitation for C7s is to bring in those donations. Only 35% of that can come back from the community.
Okay, so Now let's talk about what the issues are with spouses clubs that are C3s. Let's say you host a monthly social. How can you justify this type of event as serving the public? You can do this by hosting the event as a way to recruit volunteers for your fundraiser or as a way to appreciate the volunteers who supported your fundraiser. You can also publicize your fundraising event at your social, so it's a marketing tool. Additionally, if you do monthly service projects in conjunction with your social, like think about organizations or clubs that every month they pick a different something in the community that needs your help, like a women's shelter, or back to the animal shelter, like you collect dog food and cat litter and whatever to donate to the animal shelter, or you know, a lot of clubs in November will do a canned food drive so that they can resupply the food bank. That also helps to use a social event as a way to provide public support. So I already mentioned the wine club. So hosting an event like that does not really support the public, since you're not raising funds to the public. You are hosting an event for your members. However, if you can find a way to set up your sub clubs / special interest groups as small groups that are constantly working on gathering or making raffle prizes, like think of a craft club and you're having a major fundraiser and you need stuff to raffle off. Well, if your craft sub clubs are, you know, making crocheted pumpkins and you're going to sell them, then that's working towards your mission. Maybe they're out, you know, let's all go out to lunch and scope out this venue for a future fundraiser. That's another way you can justify the social aspect of the event is a scouting mission for the best venues. And also it's a way that you can go out and develop relationships with area vendors by saying, hey, look, you know, 12 of us has come here for lunch. Maybe the next time we host an event, we could ask you to cater it, or maybe you want to advertise in our newsletter. You know, it's always a way to develop relationships within your community, is a way you can function as a C3 and legally have the fun part of it go towards the public support that you're doing.
Sorry, skipping through here. Sorry. All right, so we're talking about the missions of 501c7s as compared to the 501c3s. So your 501c7, and we kind of already touched on this, is you're providing networking opportunities to support each other. So again, building those relationships and fostering a sense of community among the members. Those common activities, again, include things that a lot of the 501c3s do just for fun. So under 501c7, you can definitely include those. In fundraisers, they're still on the table, but you're going to focus on a much smaller, I guess, goal would be the appropriate word. So really all the money that you're going to bring in for your 501c7s fundraisers, they're going to go back to your membership. And again, you have to stay within that 35% role. So if you do ask a local business, or if you're hosting a raffle or things, all that money does have to go back into your club and the membership. Because again, you're not serving the public, you're serving your members. The key advantage is you have a lot more flexibility. So I think a lot of spouses clubs now, they're really trying to focus on, you know, just getting together and having a good time, especially post-COVID. So again, if this is your focus, then a 501c7 is perfect for you, because you don't have to worry about setting up fundraising and asking for donations and things like that. And you don't have to justify every activity as serving the public, because again, you're focusing on creating those bonds and friendships with folks that have already kind of connective tissue there. So 501c7s are perfect for organizations that want to prioritize the connection and fun, and of course, community building. But And I don't want to focus so much on the cons because both are really good options depending. I know some of the smaller, more remote bases, you might want to just focus on being social and having fun. But if you're in a larger community where you really get the community support, then you would have the 501c3. So really the big pros for 501c3, you're talking about your tax deductible donations. It makes it easier to attract donors and secure sponsorships. I know previously we had done a golf scramble and really trying to get big hole-in-one prizes. As a 501c7, you're not able to do that, but as a 501c3, you are, and then all that money from the golf scrambles could go back to your scholarships. You're also eligible as a 501c3 for grants and the other funding opportunities. So again, talking about getting those big money donations. And because you're serving a broader audience and not specializing in just taking care of those members, it would probably bring your organization a little bit more credibility. And again, kind of focusing on those, if you're on the gate, inside the gate and trying to work with your local community as a 501c3, again, because those donations are tax deductible. I think a lot of the local communities love to hear that. And they're a little bit more inclined to help and jump in and support your mission and your cause, whether it be grants for community giving requests or scholarships for the local community as well. And really another positive, the 501c3, and I don't think we talk about this enough, is you still make those really great social connections because you're working with others towards a common goal. I know personally some of the best friends that I've made are those that I've served with just running a thrift shop. And I've done that 3 different times at 3 different installations. And those are probably the friends that I keep in contact with the most. So again, 501c3, you're raising tons of money, working really hard, kind of outward facing, but it really helped me build some really close friendships. With the 501c3, though, you have to think about the kind of the cons, which isn't always, the thing that you want to talk about, but you're looking at kind of restricting those social activities again. So you have to ensure that those events, as Carolyn mentioned, are tied directly to the mission of serving the public. And then as a 501c3, which is why we're having this uncomfortable conversation, is because of the higher compliance requirements. There's more paperwork and accountability with the IRS, and fundraising must focus on your external causes, not member-specific activities. But again, your pros for 501c3 is more freedom in your social activities. So we kind of notice that everybody loves a good wine club. So 501c7, you guys can wine club and you don't have to worry about, complying with anything but with your members, and you don't have to tie it at any way to serving the public because you're prioritizing member engagement. You also have simpler operations. There's less IRS oversight and fewer reporting requirements compared to your 501c3. And it's perfect for, again, creating those community-driven, member-focused organizations. The cons for 501c7, you're going to have that limited fundraising flexibility. We can't stress this enough. 35% of your income can come from outside sources. Everything else needs to come from either dues or internal raffles and things like that. The donations from your community are not going to be tax deductible, and you're also restricted for applying for grants since they're typically geared towards C3 organizations. So really the takeaway that I hope that you get out of this, the pros and cons, is that if your goal is to serve the public and rely on external funding, a 501c3 is probably the way to go. But if your focus is on creating a vibrant community for your members with lots of social activities, a 501c7 offers the flexibility you need. It's all about aligning your mission. So I know that we're going to get a ton of questions, and this is really the heart of this conversation. Is there are a lot of I know specifically Air Force spouses clubs that they love the social aspect, but a lot of them are also running either a thrift shop or a gift shop. So how do you run a dual organization? And so we're going to kind of walk through that, but again, it's going to vary some based on which state you're located in. So if you're running a dual organization, you're probably looking at the opportunity to give both grants and scholarships back to your local community. If you are running a thrift shop and you have a spouses club, then if you want to request grants or scholarships funds, then you can only serve on the C7 board. So as we go back to, again, talking about the IRS oversight for C7s versus C3s, you can start both of those on your base. But again, if you're looking to receive grants or scholarships, then you should look at serving on the C7 board, because board members cannot profit from the mission of a C3. And why would you want to go dual? I feel like we've really highlighted that a lot, because I think a lot of spouses clubs and a lot of spouses, as they travel, they want to get involved in the community and they want to give back. But you can't do it under one umbrella. You have to have your C7 for your social, and you have to have your C3 for giving back, which again can include your thrift shop. So in order to do that, you would set up two separate organizations. You'll need separate board of directors for each, separate bank accounts, separate bylaws, and you'll have to do annual audits each year. The 501c7 handles member-focused activities, and then your 501c3 handles public-focused efforts like fundraising for scholarships, community grants, and thrift shop operations. I think that the most important thing is you definitely have to make sure that there's clear distinctions. You must, so again, go back to the wine club, 501c7 might host a wine tasting event just for members, while a 501c3 organizes a charity gala open to the public. So they can work together, but they can't be overlapping. And again, you prevent the overlap with the two different boards, the different bank accounts, the different bylaws. And I think, Carolyn, as we've been kind of talking through this, you were mentioning clubs that have been a C7 or C7 and now they want to focus on a C3. So what's your experience with that, or how would you kind of explain that to folks on how to kind of adjust from a C7 to a C3?
Well, if you are a C7 and you have all your documents and everything is set the way it is, the easiest thing, as long as you have enough people who are willing to run a separate organization, the easiest thing is to start fresh and to open up a new organization within with the IRS, where you file I think it's a 1023 easy form, and you start a 501c3 and you maintain your C7, and then you also start a C3, and then you run your external fundraisers and your community giving and scholarships through your C3 side, but you use the people who are members of your C7 to provide the manpower to make all of those things in the C7, the C3 side of it happen. So you have to think of it as two different organizations, and the C7 people are the members and they're doing the fun stuff, but then they're like, oh, now we're all going to volunteer to run the golf scramble. And the golf scramble is technically run through the C3 board, but the manpower that make it happen, other than the 3 or 4 people who are on the board of the C3, comes from the C7 side. So it's probably what a lot of people are already doing. They're just not doing it exactly legally. And so we're just trying to define the examples to show the division between the two. But I think, like you said, you just have to make sure you keep all the paperwork separate, and you hold board meetings, and you file your taxes, and you do your audits as two different organizations. It's very hard to convert from a C7 to a C3. It's much easier to open up a new C3. And if you want to close your C7 because you're just plain not doing social stuff, you're only worrying about the mission of serving the public, then you open your C3, and then you go through the process of dissolving your C7, and it is a step-by-step process, and it does vary by state. And you would then donate whatever funds you have left in your bank account of your C7 to the new C3 organization, and then you could just run your C3. And I can tell you, I just talked to a club who's going through this, and I'm like, are you sure you want to close your C7? Are you not going to have social stuff? It's really hard to start these up. Why would you dissolve something that you already have going? And they're like, look, we just want to run our thrift shop, and we want to run our Cinderella's closet, and we want to do the stuff that, we bring money in and we give it away. We don't have monthly socials. We don't have all this stuff. And so we just don't want to bother with it. And I'm like, okay, well then that's what you should do. And so there's a dissolution process. It's all on the IRS website. It tells you exactly what to do. But it is I think I want to say it's a 2 to 3 month process, because you have to inform your members and you have to give them a certain amount of time to reply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like, okay, we're done, and you just stop worrying about it anymore. You have to actually close it. Otherwise you're going to get fined and whatnot. So there's that.
I think you have to allow time for your new governing docs to get approved by either the base or garrison commander as well. So yeah, allowing for that time can be tricky as well.
Yeah, and sometimes the IRS takes longer to approve your application as well. It can be up to 6 months. Sometimes it's only 2 or 3, but it just depends. So there's that too. All right, so. All right, Rhonda, you're up.
Okay, let's go back one slide, if we can, for the requirements. They'll just briefly. So as we talked about before, I'm just going to go back historically, like Carolyn said and Heather both said, that clubs have been running. A lot of clubs have been running this way. And originally they may have started as a C7. They're like, hey, let's do a social club. And they're running that. And then they decide, oh, well, we're going to do fundraising. But then the IRS says, if you're doing continual fundraising like a thrift shop, you need to be a separate entity. So then they opened up the thrift shop as a C3. So they already have, a lot of clubs are already running a C3 and a C7. We just want to make sure that with regulations and everything, you're following those. And the key thing is the requirements is you have a separate board of directors. And there can be some crossover in board governance, but you really want to make sure that there's 2 separate boards. So you might ask, well, what's a board look like? So like right now, if you've got a C7 board, you've got a welfare community giving side and you have a social side. And there's usually a vice president who's in charge of either side. So really the simplest way is you just kind of divide that for the new board, and any positions that are related to fundraising, community giving, any of that now becomes your C3 side. And then anything that's on the social side stays as a C7. And that's how you can start creating your 2 boards. Ideally, you do have a separate secretary and a separate treasurer for each board, because that really maintains that separation. One thing to remember too, the C3 does not have members. All of your members, as Carolyn had said earlier, on the C7 side, but they're there as a support for the C3, but your boards are still separate. And then you're going to also have some distinct filings for both federal and state compliance, because if you have a C3 and a C7, you're going to have different EINs for each. So your filings have to be separated by EINs. And then you're going to have all of your regular audits and submissions to your private organization on your installation. And you're going to, your monthly meeting minutes, your budgets, your budget updates. You have to submit your constitutions and bylaws. So all that has to be done now for each board, one for C3, one for C7. Okay, and then let's get into the planning of if you are, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so if you're looking at transitioning to a dual structure, or like I said, in many cases, you're already there. So the first thing you want to do is kind of evaluate, and is this really feasible? And really, the club leadership just needs to have the ability to separate the activities between the 2 clubs, and you have to have enough volunteers to govern both boards. And in reality, a C3 board does not have to be very big. It can be a much smaller board. And then just remember that your C7 has all your volunteers for fundraising. That's another little step with that. Oops, I'm sorry, I missed. Okay. And as far as the membership is concerned, if you're already running a C3 and a C7, all of this really is just the administrative side to make sure that you're following IRS regulations. Your membership and the general public is really not going to see much of a difference. It's going to run the same, but you just want to make sure you're running legally. So now you've decided that you're running as a dual structure. So you've got to do new constitution and bylaws for each organization. And the mission statements for a C3 and a C7 are going to be vastly different. So on a 3C, you would put things like you're going to raise funds that will be given to organizations on the installation and in the surrounding community. And then if you have a thrift shop, you also might add a statement about the thrift shop is there and providing military families goods at a reasonable cost. So once again, that C3 is all about the community mission. And the constitutions for each organization then, because you have a separate constitution, they clearly define the relationship between the two organizations. And the C3 is your fundraising arm, and the C7 is your social arm. And then you have your bylaws for each that accomplish how that mission is going to happen. So, for example, you would say that the C3, and in many cases the thrift shop or gift shop, it's raising money that goes back to the community. And then members of the C7 serve as part of the a committee that decides how and where those funds are distributed. And then in some cases, the C3 might have their own committee to decide on how it's distributed. So then once you decide, okay, we're going to implement that, you really need, you have to have your separate accounts. And in many cases right now, if you have a C3 and a C7, you already have an operational account and a welfare account. So you've got your accounts there. You're just now separating them into different boards. So you'll have an operational account, a welfare giving account, and then you will also need a thrift shop or gift shop account, a separate account, if you have those. And then you're going to set up your board roles, and you need the two different boards, and they need to run independently. They need to be self-governing, and there's minimal overlap between the two to maintain that separation. So you really want to look to make sure they're running separately and that one board does not have complete control over the other. Because once again, they've got to run independently. And at this point, you may need to talk and get some advice from an attorney in your state to find out what is to define the relationship between the C3 and the C7. Is it a parent-child relationship, or is it a sibling, a brother-sister relationship? So how are these two clubs going to function together? But once again, you can't have one having control over the other. The other thing you want to do when you're establishing that board is if you do have a thrift shop, you want to make sure that members on that C3 board are also well-versed and very knowledgeable with the daily workings of the thrift shop, because that board is making decisions about your, it's making decisions about fundraising, but it's also making decisions about the thrift shop. And you don't want people making decisions about the thrift shop if they don't know how the thrift shop runs. So you've got to be smart when you're setting up that C3 side of the board. And then once again, each side needs to maintain its own financial records, meeting minutes, budgets, and just everything that's required by your private organization on your installation. Okay, so the thrift shops are a primary source of fundraising for a lot of clubs. And something that you always just need to remember, to keep you legal with where the money is going. Public money stays public, private money stays private. So if you're raising money on a thrift shop, it's a C3, that money has to go back to the public. If you're, as Heather talked about, you're raising money internally as a C7, as your social organization, that money stays within your C7. And thrift shop money is raised by the public, so that money has to go back to the community. And so typically you've got, and I'll just reference Air Force Spouse Clubs, they're run as a C3, and then the C7 side has the committee that decides where that money goes. And then just one of the bigger things too is thrift shops can give you more flexibility in giving on fundraising and how often you give out money, because thrift shops are earning money every month. So you may not have to wait till the once a year to give away money, or you can give away quarterly or maybe even monthly if you want, because you know you're getting in income throughout the year, not just waiting for that one big fundraiser throughout the year. And the thing that you have to remember is all money raised from the thrift shops have to go back to the community. At the end of the year, if an operational of the C7 side has some leftover money, they can transfer that money over to the C3 as a donation. But you cannot go the other way. You absolutely cannot take money that is raised publicly and give it to the C7 to run their events. That is an absolute no-no. And there's so many other avenues, or there's so many questions that arise with thrift shops and fundraising. So that's another entire conversation on its own. So we won't get to that today, but you basically just have your C7 social side and your C3 fundraising side, how to look at that. And we recommend that if you are running a dual organization, all your fundraising is done on the C3 side, so that you are not violating any of the C7 rules that Heather talked about of the 35% rule. It's just all fundraising C3 side, and it makes it clean, and the two sides are separated, and it can function very easily as a dual organization.
So I think we've really touched on a lot with this conversation, and I think we've really highlighted that as a 501c3, your primary focus is really about serving the public, and as a 501c7, that's the perfect organization of what you're trying to do is create a tight-knit social community just for your members. I think if focus is going to be the focus for your organization is going to be scholarships and grants, then you should absolutely be running a 501c3. And if you really just want to kind of take care of the other spouses in your community and just have a good time, with the focus not being on raising money and trying to give that away, and having the community kind of take an interest, or kind of open the door for those questions about where's the money going and what are you guys doing, then focus on the 501c7. But it's really not just about the IRS rules. I think every spouse club out there has a mission, and you need to make sure a mission and a vision. You need to make sure that your club is actually aligning with that mission and vision. So I have seen 501c7s with the best intentions. They do want to give away grants and scholarships, which again, the intention is good and it's there, but that's not what the vision of a 501c7 is. So just take a look again and see what your membership would like to do with the club, and make sure that the alignment is with not just with the IRS, but with the vision of the club. And whether you're fostering connections among members or serving the broader community or trying to do both, your organization still has the potential to make a very meaningful impact, whether you're raising money or not. So it's really important that you just take the time, especially this time of the year as we start rolling into kind of document review season. And so assess your club's current activities and what they're doing and what the current mission and goals are, and discuss with the board, especially those that are going to stay on next year, what kind of structure they want to support moving forward. And I can't stress this enough that these are definitely guidelines in the council. We have a lot of resources available for you, but if you're considering a change, you definitely need to seek advice from a local nonprofit professional or even legal counsel just to make sure that the transition is smooth and compliant. So we want to thank you so much for joining us today. I definitely see that we have some questions here in the chat, but I just want to make sure that you know that you can contact us anytime at contact@councilformilitaryspouseClub.org, msc.org. This material that we produced and discussed by the council is for your informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. You should contact your attorney or obtain advice with respect to any particular issue or problem, but the council may be able to provide you with referral for either your local bar association or pro bono legal organization to help you out. But yeah, we'll open the floor for discussion, questions here. And Carolyn or Rhonda, feel free to jump in and help kind of talk us through this, but will you be able to share this recording with us? And we definitely will do that. We also have a tax and regulation document that we've uploaded to our website. And then we have the 501c versus 501c7 document that we plan to share. We're going to email it to everybody that registered today, but we're also going to do some social media posts with both, hopefully this recording, but some of the slides and then those documents as well.
And also eventually this will be uploaded to our YouTube site, which you can get to through our website or directly to the council's YouTube page. So or channel, I guess. Either way, it will be available for.
Oh, I think we lost Carolyn for a second. Were there any other questions? Okay. There she is.
Sorry, I'm back. One thing I was going to say is if you're truly interested in finding out more, if you want to gather your board together and have us join a board meeting virtually so that we can answer questions about this presentation or specific to your organization, we're happy to try to set that up. So the council's purpose is to provide help and support to all the clubs out there so that they can remain vibrant and a strong part of your community so that you can serve your military spouses. So we want to be there to help. So I can share a question that came up the other day, just so you guys sort of have that in the back of your mind. People were talking about scholarships, and they were talking about how to give away scholarships in a C3 versus a C7. And it was all about, can I give scholarships only to my members? And just like everything else we talked about, if you're a C3, your mission is for the public. If you're a C7, your mission is for your club. So if you are a C3 and you have raised funds outside of your organization and advertise during that time that we are giving away scholarships to military members and military family members, or spouses who are continuing their education, or military children that are in college and continuing on in college, you can't turn around and only restrict that money to go to your members, because that means you're raising money from the public to only serve yourself. So the only way you can do that is if your membership is allowed to be very open. Like, let's just say this, for example, if you are an officer spouses club, then that's too restrictive. If you are just an enlisted spouse club, that's too restrictive. If you only allow active duty people, spouses to be a part of your organization, that's too restrictive. But if you are on an installation and your club welcomes pretty much any military spouse can join, then the IRS calls it a class, and that means your class is large. And if your mission is to serve the military spouse community and you are giving away scholarships to the military spouse community, because all of those people are allowed to join your club, it makes your class very large. But if your club is limited in your membership, your class is not big enough to justify a C3 giving away money to just your members. So I know that's very confusing, but it's all about the size of the class, the number of people that can do it. I had some people say, well, we want to give it away only to members because it's a lot of work and it costs us money because we're making all these copies and we're buying binders and we're doing all this stuff. And I said, okay, well then if that's the restriction and you're doing it because members pay a membership, then if somebody is allowed to be a member, but they choose not to join, they pay a application fee of $15 or whatever it is. And that brings them in as a type of member that's allowed to apply for a scholarship, or their kids allowed to apply for a scholarship. But if you're a C7 and you want to give away a scholarship or a grant to just your members, that's okay, because you've raised money giving away within just your members. So all the members of your organization are donating money through their attendance or through their raffle ticket purchase or whatever they're doing. And then you can select one person to receive or two people to receive a scholarship based on how much money you bring in. And so that's an aspect of the scholarships and community giving that we sort of touched on, but that's sort of a little deeper dive into it. So those are all questions that have come up. The other question that comes up, and Heather talked about it, and I'm just going to reiterate it because this is kind of a big point, is if you are serving on the governing board of a 501c3 that is giving away scholarships or grants, you or your family members are not eligible to receive a scholarship or a grant from that organization. You, as a person who is serving on that board, is not allowed to personally benefit from the operation of that organization. And that is written in the IRS guidelines. And I tell you this, it's definitely written in the Army regulations. I don't know if it's written into the any of the other service regulations. Okay. Most of those aren't as specific as the Army regulations. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. And that's one of the reasons why we say, well, hey, here's a good idea. Why don't you, if you have a college student returning, or if you have a high school senior, why don't you serve on the C7 board and, be gung-ho about getting volunteers and providing support for the fundraisers, but don't serve on the C3 board, so that when your child applies for a scholarship and the C3 is giving that money away, they're eligible to receive it. So that's one of those things to keep in mind. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions right now. So again, we just remind you that if you have questions, please reach out to any of us. Contact at councilformsc.org. You can join our Facebook discussion group. And we're happy to sort of crowdsource some of these questions. It's really interesting to hear questions and then see how other organizations out in the world respond. So that's kind of fun to get all sorts of crazy ideas from all sorts of other people. And then we as a council can jump in and sort of redirect if somebody's sharing advice that is not necessarily within legal guidelines. So other than that, we really, really appreciate you guys joining us today. And for those watching in the future, again, if you have questions, you're welcome to email us after the fact. Join the discussion group. Check us out on LinkedIn. We now are on Instagram, so if you can follow us on Instagram, we'd love to get our Instagram numbers up and post something within our Instagram site about what you're doing in your clubs. Everybody loves to see what everybody else is up to. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks to Rhonda and Heather and the whole Council for Military Spouse Club board for putting this together. And everybody have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you again in the new year.